From NJ.com, this is Talk is Cheap, a New York Giants podcast. We're talking Big Blue football all year round.
Welcome on in, Giants fans, to episode 83 of Talk is Cheap, our New York Giants podcast right here on NJ.com. I'm Joe Giglio, joined as always by James Cratch and Dan Duggan. They cover the Giants for NJ Advanced Media. We are now less than a month away from the NFL year officially beginning. We'll have the Combine in a couple weeks. Free agency rumors are heating up. And then March 9th, everything will start. Free agency, trades, it's all on the table in less than a month. And the Giants have an interesting offseason here. Not one we expect to be close to as active as last year, but some big decisions to make, both in guys they keep, guys they might release, and who they might go after in free agency. James, we'll start with you. It's a different year. I mean, it's weird because last year we were all gearing up, and I remember talking to you at this time last year for the Giants to be big players. And this year, that same feeling isn't there, yet there are some big decisions to be made.
Yeah, no, they don't have nearly as much cap space this offseason at the moment as they did last year, and I don't think there's necessarily as much of a major push that they have to desperately add these certain pieces. But they have some really big decisions to make. Obviously, Jason Pierre-Paul is the headliner in this free agency class of their own. They have to make a decision on. You also got Jonathan Hankins. You've also got, to a lesser extent, kind of the second tier, Keenan Robinson and some other guys. And you also have some guys on the roster that they're going to have to make decisions on. We've talked ad nauseum about DRC, whether there's a decision to be made there or not. JT Thomas, Shane Vereen maybe even Dwayne Harris, although I think that's not really going to happen for a couple of reasons. So the Giants, this is kind of a low-key offseason, but I do think there's a lot of things they're going to have to do in the next couple of weeks that are going to be interesting and intriguing as they sort of get the ball rolling on 2017.
Dan, when you look at the offseason, what's the first thing that pops out to you when you look at the guys they have that they could re-sign or could get rid of? Like, when you look at all the decisions they have to make over the next couple weeks, which one is the most intriguing to you?
So as far as what matters, is definitely JPP. I mean, I think he's someone we're going to talk about a lot, over the next month plus, once free agency kicks off. I mean, that's clearly the biggest guy that they have to make a decision on as far as re-signing players. He's going to command the most money. He's the best player that's a free agent. And I think really what they do with him is kind of going to be the first domino that'll dictate, what they do in free agency, where their priorities lie. Because obviously you bring him back, you're going to tie up a lot of your cap, but then again, you don't have to go out and find a defensive end. So it'll be really interesting. I think it's going to set the agenda for the offseason. I know we're going to get into that more, but I think JPP is really the, kind of the key point that's going to, set the stage for how this offseason plays out.
So, James, when you look at the JPP situation and how big of a deal this is, I mean, obviously he's been there for years. He's been one of the best players for years. They did get through a couple games without him last year, and they actually played well in a couple games without him. But how vital is this decision for the Giants? Not only in, what he means to the team and, the fan base has been there for a long time, but their defense. How important is JPP to what they want to do next year? I mean, is he a make or break for them, or are they going to have a price, you think, and say, look, we'll give you this, but if you get more, thanks for the memories?
Yeah, I think strictly you look at the player, of course JPP is really important to what they're trying to do, just because, this whole thing is kind of built on having, Olivier Vernon on one side, JPP on the other, generating that sort of pass rush. I mean, I know they both didn't have major sack numbers this year, but I felt like right before JPP got hurt, they definitely were getting to a point, granted they had played the Bears and the Browns, that the pass rush was kind of becoming an overwhelming thing for opposing offenses. That being said, I don't look at it as a make or break decision for the Giants, because I think there's a good chance that the Giants really don't have a decision to make. Just because the way I look at it is, and I'll see what Dan and you guys think, is that if JPP gets the market that he reportedly desires and no brainer would desire to be paid at the level of what the Giants gave Olivier Vernon last season, I don't really know if the Giants are going to have much to say about that. I mean, I think if that market develops for JPP and someone's willing to give him that much money, or even more, considering the cap's going to go up at least $10 million again, probably, the Giants might just have to shake his hand and wish him all the best and thank him for everything. I think if that market doesn't develop for JPP and his price is below Vernon, then I think the Giants – I think the lower the market is set for JPP, the better the Giants' chances of re-signing him are. But if he gets anywhere near Vernon money, my thought process is the Giants really can't go that high, and they're just going to have to accept the fact that he's going to go someplace else.
Dan, how do you feel about this? I mean, we were talking before we hopped on and started the episode. So the Giants are sitting at about $24 million as we record this podcast on Monday, February 13th. We know that's going to change. They'll probably be able to clear out some more money, maybe not $20 million more, but a little bit more to add and to keep some guys they have. Do you think that JPP could price himself out, or do you think they have enough money if they want to bring him back that they'll make it work?
Yeah, I certainly think he could price himself out. I mean, to put in context, when James mentions Vernon's contract, you're talking 5 years, $85 million with $52 million guaranteed. So obviously that's a pretty hefty chunk of change. I think the thing that's working against JPP is obviously his injury history, and that's not even just including his hand, which he really showed wasn't a factor this year, but hasn't played 16 games very many times in his career at all. Obviously missed the end of this season, and he's a year and a half older than Vernon. So all those things are going to work against him. Obviously, maybe work in the Giants' favor if you want to look at it like that. But if he holds strong at that Vernon thing, I think at that point you probably have to walk away. I mean, I actually think pound for pound on the field this year, JPP was probably a little bit better than Vernon. Not that there's no slight there. I mean, they both played at or around Pro Bowl level, but I think JPP was a little bit more of a disruptive factor in kind of all facets. But again, those factors of the injuries and the age should knock his value down a bit. But like James said, I mean, teams, you look around the league, teams have so much money in cap space. This is a little bit like what the Giants did last year, but even more. So if somebody wants JPP and they're willing to pay whatever it is, if you're the Giants, you absolutely can't afford to get into a bidding war and pay this guy just an obscene amount of money. There's just value, and it becomes to a point where it's not worth it anymore. So I definitely think they could get priced out. If I'm the Giants, I think the thing I would love to do is get him on a 4-year deal too. Even just knock off an extra year, because obviously that's going to bring the money down. I mean, you're going to pay a lot of guaranteed money to a guy in his position, but if you can get it to like in the 4 years, $64 million rather than 5 years, $85, I think that would be ideal. But again, the market's going to dictate it. I mean, JPP's made it clear he's not interested in a hometown discount. Can't blame him. He's taken 2 under market deals the last 2 years, obviously, through his own fault of the fireworks accident. But this is his last chance to cash in. So even the franchise tag, he said he doesn't want that. Obviously, if he gets $17 million for 1 year, that wouldn't be the worst thing to set up your family. But like I said, $52 million guarantees a lot better, and I think he's obviously going to look for a deal like that.
Yeah, the franchise tag is interesting. James, do you think that's an option here? Because if the Giants don't want to go 4 or 5 years with all that guaranteed money, we've seen this. We see it basically every year where a team doesn't feel like they're ready to do that, or they don't want it, or they're not comfortable. They keep a guy for a year and they worry about it the next year. It would take up a large chunk of their cap space, but of course they'd keep him from leaving.
I think it's only an option if the Giants, and I don't think this is the way they're looking at things, have decided that they are going all out in 2017 to try to win the Super Bowl. Because if you tag JPP, I mean, he said he didn't want the cap space. Well, you're not going to probably be able to come to a long-term agreement with him before the deadline for the tag. So it's almost like JPP is here for 2017. He's taking, you have basically $24 million projected cap space right now. The tag is projected to be $17 million for defensive ends. So he's basically taking all of your cap space in one move. He's probably not going to be happy, and my assumption is he plays the 2017 season, and then you really have no shot to get him because he hits the market again next year. I don't think you're going to tag him a second time and jack it up. I don't even know if they would be able to tag him a second time, because it would technically be a third time dating back to the injury. And then the cap's going to go up again, and his price range is going to go up again. You have Melvin Ingram from the Chargers about to hit the market. So honestly, there's a chance he might surpass what Vernon gets, and then JPP would be shooting for Melvin Ingram money in 2018. So I don't think the tag is a realistic option, just because you tie up so much of your cap space into it. Now, another thing, I think Giants fans have to realize this. JPP should have been signed to a long-term deal in 2015. Now, I'm not trying to relitigate the fireworks accident or put blame on him or blame on anybody. I'm just saying, if JPP doesn't have that freak accident, he would have signed his long-term big payday 2 years ago. They probably still would have been able to get Vernon last offseason, and they'd be set now. So I just think it's a really unique situation that might all conspire against the Giants and lead them to lose Jason Pierre-Paul 2 years after he should have signed a long-term deal with them.
The big mitigating factor I'll throw in with JPP too is I would feel a lot better about letting him walk if you had somebody waiting in the wings that showed that they could step in, and they don't have that at all. That's the biggest problem. Because I think I've said this before in this podcast. We talk so much about cap savings, but it's not really cap savings. If you let JPP walk, you still have to spend a good chunk of what you would have given him to find a replacement. So it's not just, oh, we have all this money to spend. Well, yeah, now you got to go fill the hole you just created by saving that money. So it's like a guy like if Owa Odigizua had shown what they were probably hoping they would have seen from him as a third-round pick, you maybe feel better about letting JPP walk. But he hasn't at all in his 2 years. Romeo Okwara, I know everyone gets excited about an undrafted free agent anyways, and he had the great start against the Cowboys in JPP's place, and then you didn't hear his name the rest of the season. And that's not a knock on him. I think he's a very good undrafted free agent. I mean, to get that out of him as a rookie was great. I think he's a piece going forward, but definitely better suited as a number 3 defensive end in a rotation. So that's my biggest feeling why the Giants really need to re-sign JPP and figure out a way to make it work. It's just that there's no obvious replacement. So then you're going to let him walk because the price tag gets too high, which I think there is they have to set a value and not, go crazy and, outbid it, anything like that. But then you're going to go get someone else for, probably close to that or at least, a good amount of money. And he's not going to be as good a player. So, everything is all about value, obviously, when you're balancing these things. But I think the biggest problem for them is they don't have any leverage in the sense that, hey, if you walk, we'll just plug Owe in there because, no one's going to believe that, and they obviously wouldn't feel good about it.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And their defense is the strength of their team. They should want to keep that together. All right, so both of you guys have said that, and I think this makes sense for any team, set a price, and then if it gets too crazy, you have to just be willing to walk away. But to play devil's advocate here, James, I'm looking at their list of potential free agents, guys that are going to hit the market they have to either re-sign or walk away from. We've already said they have about $24 million. Maybe they can get it up to around $30 million. Who else do they have to pay here, right? Like, I'm looking at Pierre-Paul, and I get it, right? You don't want to say, okay, we're going to give this much of the cap to him because he's only one guy and he hasn't been the most durable player. But it's not like we're looking at a list of 5 or 6 guys that we all think they have to re-sign, right? Like, they don't have that many impact potential free agents outside of Pierre-Paul, and we could throw Jonathan Hankins in there, right? Or do you think they have to bring back some of these other guys?
Well, I think there are some guys that are going to be free agents this year that they should look to bring back, but don't look at this year. Look at next year, when Weston Richburg and Justin Pugh are scheduled to be unrestricted free agents. Look down the road where, Odell Beckham's extension is looming, Landon Collins. So I think that's more the thing. The Giants are kind of in a strange place where they don't have any really must re-sign guys, with the exception of maybe JPP and Hankins, on this year's free agent class. But next year they're going to have, 2 building blocks, you would think, on their offensive line, and then they've got the 2 superstars down the road as well. So I think that's what the Giants have to have an eye to the future as well. Look, I think we've said this a lot of times. The Giants are in a kind of a interesting place as a franchise because they're trying to win now with their aging quarterback who's on the back 9, but they're also have this good young talent in their team. They're trying to maybe build a future down the road in the post-Eli era. So I think they also have to consider the guys that are coming up soon if they're going to tie up a tremendous amount of cap space, not only this year, but next year and going forward in Jason Pierre-Paul.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Just think about it for this year. They have plenty of cap room to fit him in. Then we move forward, and things could change there. The other big name, the second big name, is a guy that plays next to Pierre-Paul on that defensive line sometimes, a lot of times, Dan, and Jonathan Hankins. I don't know how the Giants can assess what he's worth compared to what the Pierre-Paul's worth. They play different positions, both on the defensive line. It's hard to imagine both are coming back. How do you think they should value Hankins here?
Yeah, I think if it's an either-or proposition, you would take JPP, 10 times out of 10 if you're matching him up with Hankins. But, of course, the problem is there. that's going to drive the value up for JPP. So it'd be a lot more expensive to keep him. So I think it's almost like a deal. Maybe Hankins becomes a consolation if you lose JPP. You can bring Hankins back, at a much cheaper deal. But it's going to be interesting to see what his market is, because honestly, I've kind of come to the point where I would let him walk. I mean, I know that people are still kind of scarred by letting Linval Joseph walk, and he's really blossomed with the Vikings. But I think the difference now is you have Damon Harrison, and he's so good that it almost makes the guy next to him, I don't want to say irrelevant, because you still need you want a good player. That you want as many good players as you can have. But having Harrison be such a dominant factor, I think you can get by with just an average player there. Because at the same time, too, you have to disperse your money around. You can't pay top dollar for 4 defensive linemen. That's just not a good way to spread things out. You're going to have gaping holes other places if you invest so heavily in one position. So I think you can get by with, like I said, just like a league average type of player, whether that's Jay Bromley or whether that's some cheap veteran free agent they bring in as a stopgap. And I think no matter what, they probably need to draft a defensive tackle. So unless they can get Hankins really cheap, or if they strike out on JPP, have a little money laying around, and they feel like, well, at least we'll bring Hankins back. But I just don't see him as a pressing need. If you bring JPP back, then you have 3 dynamite defensive linemen. It becomes even less important, I think, to have a star at that that 4th spot. So I'm basically at the point where unless Hankins they can get for real cheap, which I don't think they will. I mean, he's still a young guy and has some potential, but I just don't see the need to tie up a lot of money there, because, again, you have needs on the other side of the ball, which we haven't even addressed yet. I mean, defense, like you said, they had a great defense last year. You want to almost just kind of keep it together. Obviously, that's not easy with JPP's situation, but you have to address the holes on the other side. So you might need to make a sacrifice on defense. And to me, if it comes down to Hankins and JPP, and obviously it won't dollars and cents wise, but just in terms of who I'd rather have back, it's definitely JPP, and I think you can live without Hankins.
Yeah, I'm with you. And James, when it comes to Hankins, Dan mentioned the Linval Joseph decision. I mean, that one sticks out to me because he was a rising player who I think was also a second-round pick, just like Hankins was in his year, and then he got better, and he didn't become the player he is now with the Vikings, but he was good, and Hankins is good, and I could see Hankins getting even better somewhere else, but the Giants didn't seem to have much problem letting him go, and even before that, years ago, Barry Cofield. I mean, Jerry Reese has kind of done this: draft defensive tackles, watch them play pretty well, and then let somebody else pay them.
Yeah, I mean, and I think what Dan said about the JPP and having the replacement on the roster is a good point. You can look at the defensive tackle and say, now, I don't think any of the guys they have on their roster are said to be a superstar, but I do think they have a little bit more of a legitimate claim with their current roster that they can replace Hankins, in the sense that you have Jay Bromley, who's been a guy who's flashed, but he hasn't had a whole lot of playing time in his career. He's a guy you spent a 3rd-round pick on. He kind of really needs to kind of step up. You have Robert Thomas, the mysterious Robert Thomas, who they kept on the roster for a month. He's got some pass rushing ability. You have the ability to draft a defensive tackle. Am I forgetting any of DTs, Dan, off the top of my head? Thomas, Bromley.
No, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. So that you do have guys. I mean, Jay Bromley has started games before, and I think Dan's right. If you kind of have the Snacks effect, where if you put a guy next to Snacks, his level of play is going to be raised a little bit. Just because he's playing, maybe with one of the best defensive tackle in the league. I think with Hankins, it's sort of like JPP. We don't really know what the market is going to be for him. You've got 3 big name tackles: Kawan Short from Carolina, Dontari Poe from Kansas City, Brandon Williams from Baltimore, all scheduled to be free agents. Short and Poe are potentially franchise tag guys. But, I don't know. Does the rising tide kind of raise all ships, and Hankins is going to get a lot of money for a team that needs a defensive tackle because those guys are getting big money? Or is it going to still be a situation where, those guys, I mean, I think Kawan Short's elite. Poe's kind of close to elite. Williams is a guy who I think might be able to, run stuffer, who might kind of get to ride Snacks' financial coattails and make some money this offseason. Or are those teams going to say, well, Hankins is a good player, but he's nowhere near these guys, and we're not going to pay top dollar for that because we can just go draft a defensive tackle or we have a guy on our own team. So that's the big thing for me, is what does Hankins' market become? If Hankins' market is reasonable, I think the Giants probably could re-sign him, if nothing else, then to make sure they don't go over 2 with JPP and Hankins, and they do bring back a guy that they like and everything. But I agree with Dan. I don't think if the Giants lose Jonathan Hankins, I don't think it's the end of the world, and I think it's something that they could relatively quickly recover from, whether it's in the draft or the guys they have on their roster.
Yeah, I actually think the probably number 2 priority in free agency, and like you said, Joe, there aren't a lot of big guys. There's a lot of veterans you can probably bring back on minimum or close to minimum deals. I think Keenan Robinson is probably more important than Hankins, because I think he plays a little bit more of an important role. I mean, he was that coverage linebacker that they so desperately lacked in 2015. I thought he had a very solid season, stayed healthy, which was probably the biggest thing for him last year. I don't think he's going to command top dollar. I mean, he's probably not going to be looking for another 1-year deal, because he showed that he can stay healthy, and I think he kind of boosted his value with how he played last year. But I think he's more important to what the Giants do, especially if they're going to give B.J. Goodson a shot at middle linebacker, which, I mean, they haven't come out and said that, but it seemed logical, especially because Kelvin Shepard is a free agent, and he really didn't play that well last season. So if you're going to put Goodson in there as a rookie who's more of a downhill, old-school middle linebacker, I think Robinson's even more valuable, because he'd be that guy to come in passing situations, which he did so much of last season anyway. So I really say he's more of a priority, in my opinion, than Hankins would be.
James, and that's interesting. I hadn't thought of Robinson with that word, that P word, priority, but it's hard to disagree. I mean, he plays a pretty big role for them, and I could see why they'd want to have him back. James, when you look at the rest of the list, right, Pierre-Paul and Hankins, they're the top names. We mentioned earlier there's not 6 or 7 can't let him go guys. Dan just mentioned Keenan Robinson. When you look at the list, give me a name that you'd look at and say, this guy's interesting. I wonder if they're going to bring him back or move on, or what they're going to do with this player.
Oh, man. You're right. It's not exactly like a great list.
Is it Robinson for you, or is it someone else?
I think Robinson, I agree with Dan. I would have Robinson as the second priority behind JPP. Hankins would be third. I think there's some interest. I mean, obviously, I think backup quarterback is something interesting. Are they going to bring Josh Johnson back? Are they going to bring Ryan Nassib back? First, I think, what's the status of Ryan Nassib's elbow? I mean, no one really kind of explained how significant his elbow injury was when he had surgery at the end of the season. Leon Hall's a guy who I think could be interesting, just because, he really couldn't play cornerback. I think it was kind of clear, but then he kind of really, early in the year, he really struggled. He came on really strong at the end, basically became starting safety for the Giants. So he's a guy who's interesting. I mean, for me, I think Orleans Darkwa, he's a restricted free agent, is a guy who's really interesting. The fans love him. The guy has produced usually whenever he's been given a chance, but it seems like the Giants have kind of jerked him around a lot with his playing time since he, came into his own against that game 2 years ago against the Cowboys. They never really consistently gone to him. Obviously, he had the injury that kind of hampered him before he got put on IR. So I'm really intrigued to see what the Giants do with Darkwa, because I think he's a talented enough guy that someone out there is going to tender him, I would assume. Do the Giants tender him? And if someone else tenders him, do the Giants match that and bring him back? I think that's something I'm intrigued to see, because you look at the running back situation. We know we got Paul Perkins. You assume Shane Vereen should be back. Rashad Jennings kind of up in the air. I mean, who's the fourth back going to be? Are they going to draft a guy? Or might they go to Darkwa and give Darkwa a chance to get significant carries this year?
Yeah, Dark was interesting. I know a lot of fans always are interested in what he's going to be and if he could be anything, and time will tell on that. But they have big decisions to make here. And before we get to a story you wrote, James, that we could have a little debate on today as we look forward to free agency, from each of you, give me an overview of what you think this free agent class looks like. I know, James, you put out your top 50 last week. Dan, when you look at this upcoming free agent class, and we can include JPP as part of it and Hankins as part of it, is this a strong one? Is it kind of mediocre? When you see it, what do you look at as the Giants, one, try to retain their own guys, and then two, look at what's out there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've really only looked at it from a Giants perspective, and I mean, I don't know how you would really classify if it's strong or not. I think you just look at the positions that they're going to need. Is it strong? And when you look at left tackle, which I think is the number one need for this team this offseason, it's thin. It's strong in the sense that Andrew Whitworth would be kind of a perfect fit as a short-term guy, the Bengals left tackle. But after him, it's a steep drop off, and he obviously comes with some questions in the fact that he's 35 years old. So he's been durable, but I don't know how much of an investment you want to make in a 35-year-old. But it's just such a desperate need that he would be the guy. But like I said, the fact that there's not much behind him and even some of the other tackles or right tackles wouldn't be, it wouldn't come without questions, put it that way. Tight end's another position where I think there is a little bit more depth, but I don't know that I want to shell out, kind of the big bucks that Martellus Bennett is probably going to be looking for. And I think the Patriots probably need to bring him back just with, Gronk's status so uncertain. So I think when you look at tight end, I don't think there's a lot of those kind of up-and-coming, young guys that could be your tight end of the future. I think the draft is probably a better spot to find that type of tight end for them. Guard is a strong spot, but I don't really think that's – and I know a lot of fans, look at some of the names at guard. I don't really think that's a spot that they want to go heavy with the big investment in because, you have Justin Pugh, and he's going to be coming up, for an extension. So you're going to be paying big money to one guard spot. And if you go shell out for one of these top guards, your tackle spots, you're going to put the tackle money at guard, which doesn't make sense to me because then what are you going to come back with Eric Flowers and Bobby Hart again? So I think that's a spot where it's strong at guard. It doesn't really help what the Giants are looking for. I don't think that there's a lot of defensive ends that, are on JPP's level. And if they are, they're going to, command just as much money. It's a Calais Campbell type guy. I don't think there's a lot of easy answers. So I don't know if that answers your question as far as what's a strong class, but I don't think if you look at what the Giants need, there's a ton of, you can just say, oh, that position's loaded, so they're going to fall into a guy. Wide receiver is probably that spot. I think that they can definitely get a quality number 3 wide receiver, in free agency. But when you look at the other big holes they have to fill, I don't think there's a ton of options in a really, deep position where they can just say, oh, well, we'll get a left tackle this free agency, no problem.
Yeah, last year it felt easier, right? The Giants needed defensive players. They needed help there, and there was a whole bunch of them available. And they got a corner, they got a defensive end, they got a defensive tackle, and away they went. This year doesn't feel as simple for them, James. You had a piece, we're doing this podcast on a Monday, that was on NJ.com today about a potential option for the Giants. Now, Dan just mentioned wide receiver, and the Giants are going to need a third option at wide receiver. If we imagine, Beckham's number 1, Shepard's going to emerge and they hope become their number 2. Who's that number 3? And you wrote about Deshaun Jackson, who in a lot of years would be, the second or third or fourth, best receiver on free agent class. I don't know where he ranks this year because there's a lot of good ones, but you think it could be an option for the Giants?
I don't know if it's a realistic option for the Giants. Obviously it's February 13th. Just having a little fun, obviously, with all the – but I do think Deshaun would be a fascinating fit for the Giants. As I wrote, look, I understand, there are concerns about, his attitude and the off-field stuff, size concerns. He would be another kind of 5'10" wide receiver. The Giants have a lot of those. They don't really have the big 6'3", skyscraper receiver. But the Giants need to add – another outside presence, a guy with speed who can stretch the field, take the top off of a defense. They really didn't have that this year. Well, Tavares King gave it to him for 2 games, but, after they had let him sit on the bench for 2 months. But I just think you look at Deshaun, I just think if you're going to make a splash move, and I don't know if the Giants necessarily are looking to make a splash move, Deshaun Jackson would be a move that makes the Giants immediately better on offense. Cripples the Redskins' offense, especially if they're going to lose Pierre Garçon too. Demoralizes the Eagles, who have basically been planning this thing for a year now. And the Cowboys, who have multiple defensive backs set to hit free agency. They've got to be pretty darn worried too that the Giants, their biggest threat in the NFC East at this point, are adding, an explosive playmaker. So I think it would be a fascinating move. Obviously, it would kind of be theatrics because, Deshaun's giant killer reputation and the way it would kind of impact the rest of the teams in the division. But I don't think they're signing Alshon Jeffrey. And I look at that list, I think, Kenny Stills, he's younger, so he's going to command more money. Deshaun is 30, but that would be kind of a here the Giants are, they're going for it move. I think it's a swing for the fences move. I don't know if they'd actually make it, but if they did make it, I think it would generate a lot of excitement, and it would be really kind of fascinating to add Deshaun into the fold.
It would be headline worthy. There's no doubt about that. I think it'd be fascinating too, and I think the offense would be fun to watch with him and Odell out there. I can't see it. It just, I don't know, maybe it's the past history between them. Maybe it's just with one receiver with a big personality in the roster already with Beckham. I can't see them going after a second. As much as it'd be fun to watch in theory, it would shock me. Dan, where do you stand on just the idea of the Giants going after a Deshaun Jackson?
Yeah, that would be a pass for me. Just not interesting to me. I mean, interesting as far as it would be definitely some sizzle. I said it to someone on Twitter this morning. It would look great on Madden. Like if just Deshaun Jackson running down the other sideline opposite Odell, that would work, and it seems like it should work. But I just don't see it as a good fit for what they need, because we've spent pretty much all season and into the offseason talking about how they do need size, and you're going to bring in another. He's probably the smallest receiver they have. That doesn't make a lot of sense for me. He's 30 years old. So speedy wide receivers, getting on the wrong side of 30, that doesn't seem like a great recipe. I know he doesn't miss a ton of games, but it just seems like he's always banged up, and will he play, won't he play? Does miss some time. I don't think, that shouldn't help his cause. And then, the elephant in the room is we spent so much time, everyone in the, under the sun is, talking about mentoring Odell Beckham. I don't think I would look at Deshaun Jackson as the guy that, that's who I want to, kind of take Odell under his wing. And they are friendly. So, I could see Odell maybe being a little bit of a follower if Jackson did come in, and I just don't know that that's the road you want him going down. So yeah, there's just so many question marks there. And again, I think there is a, pretty deep wide receiver class. I think there always is, that you can get a guy who will fit a lot better, probably be the same money or maybe even cheaper than what a guy like Jackson's going to command. So I'd much rather go that route. I think there's again, I think size is probably the biggest thing they need, just to have something a little different than what they already have, and more of a red zone threat. And I think there's plenty of those guys out there. Like, I don't think, like James said, I don't think they're going Alshon Jeffrey, the top free agent receiver. I don't think they need to do that. Even a guy like Terrell Pryor is probably going to ask for too much money, and he's kind of has a weird relationship with guys around the league. It seems like, of course, Janoris Jenkins, not a big fan, but
Jackrabbit would have to sign off on that.
Yeah, so that could be an interesting first day of training camp if that were to happen. But no, there's plenty of guys though in that kind of middle tier of Kenny Britt, who would have his own kind of question marks about coming back to Jersey, but otherwise he is kind of the perfect fit as far as size and what he brings on the field. But there's plenty of guys, Brandon LaFell, or you just kind of go down the list. Terrence Williams from the Cowboys, he was a good number 3 receiver for them. Probably wouldn't break the bank. I just think there's plenty of guys that they could go that would be a much better fit. Deshaun would be kind of fun for us, I think, but I don't see Ben McAdoo wanting that on his roster in his locker room when there are other options. You talk about Pierre Garçon, not a big guy, and he is older. He's 30, just like Jackson, but I think he'd be a great fit just because he it brings a physical edge out there and is tough. It's kind of like almost like a smaller version of Anquan Bolden. So he's someone who intrigued me more, but I think he's probably going to cost more than what they want to spend for that role. But yeah, I think I'd have to pass on Jackson. I think the best thing that could happen to the Giants is let some team, let the Raiders sign him or something, get him out of the NFC East. I think that would be the best case scenario for the Giants.
Joe, just to go back to one, I don't actually think. I would find it kind of a long shot that the Giants would sign Deshaun Jackson. I just thought it was kind of an interesting possibility to throw out there. To get back to what you said about the free agent class, so I think there's a good chance that when we get to the owners' meetings in late March and we all head out to Phoenix, the Giants really won't have done a whole heck of a lot in free agency. I don't think it's going to be anywhere near what it was last year, just because Dan's right. You look at the positions the Giants need and the positions, what guys are going to be available. Not a lot of depth there. Everyone talks about Whitworth, and I think he'd be a no-brainer addition as a left tackle. But if he goes elsewhere or he re-signs with the Bengals, I think, if the Giants are going to make a move for a veteran left tackle, it's going to have to be a trade, because people bring up Riley Reif, but I don't see how adding his job as a left tackle in Detroit to a rookie after struggling and was good, solid as a right tackle. I don't see why signing that guy to a multi-year contract and then putting him at left tackle is really going to make the situation any much better. And he's, I guess, Matt Khalil, people bring up, and the guy just had hip surgery, and he struggled at left tackle. So unless, some guy unexpectedly hits the market, I do think one guy that could be a fit would be Russell Okung. Denver's probably going to have to make a move on him because I think he's due like $20 million in guaranteed money if they pick up his option. So I just think there's a good chance the Giants maybe make some, little tweaks here and there, add some veteran role players, some chess pieces, but they don't really do a whole heck of a lot, and then they kind of punt it forward to the draft. I think there's a chance that the Giants they have cap space, and I do think they'll make some signings. I just don't know if they'll necessarily make any big wow signing.
Yeah, the opposite of last year. It's going to be interesting to see how they play this out. JPP, we're going to keep our eye on Hankins and what they do with a guy like Keenan Robinson. So, guys, the next couple weeks, we'll have the Combine coming up, and then this whole thing gets going on March 9th, right, Dan? So a little less than a month away from, it's basically the football year closes for, a couple weeks, and then it comes back?
Yeah, it's funny. Everyone's freaking out that, there's no football on Sunday for the first time in forever. But, yeah, there's not much of a break here because, I'm looking at the Combine is basically 2 weeks from today. And like you said, then free agency, and then we'll really get rolling. So, enjoy a little bit of downtime here, but it's going to ramp up pretty quickly.
It will, and we'll ramp up with it. We'll be back with more of these episodes. We get closer to free agency, looking at what the Giants could do, where they're at, and, of course, some reaction from the Combine and what makes sense for the Giants. James, as always, thanks for doing this.
You got it, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Joe.
And thanks to all of you for listening to episode 83 of Talk is Cheap. We'll be back soon on NJ.com, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you listen to podcasts. We're there with Talk is Cheap.